kick's got a strong kick.
Golden Mile, soar out the mile. I'm thunderstruck over the top. Mr. Brightside has won the mile.
And Militarised blows them away in the Champagne Stakes. And she's a class act, pulling right away, Prowess. And Zoo Gotcha won it by 2.5.
Zaki joined by Animo, who looks destiny in the face.
Listening back to that opener, could be like a, bit of a career killer for some of those. Prowess.
Certainly.
Prowess injured.
Yeah, I know.
So Gotcha underperformed, but not a career killer.
Golden Mile.
Golden Mile's the one.
He was dog shit.
I saw so many people going, nah. He was held up when, that unfortunate horse broke down. It's like, nah, he would have won that race. No, he wouldn't have.
No, he wouldn't have. There was, how many runners were in that race? Like 16?
Yeah.
There were, I reckon, 14 runners who went better than him.
Well, yeah.
Like, not just as in where they finished, they ran better.
Yeah, like you'd even want Lindemann out of the race, who was dog shit.
Yeah.
Because he was coughing.
100%. Well, how many horses in that Wing Stakes still are you look at their run and you're like, oh, fantastic return. Think It Over, Francesco Guardi, like terrific return. Duis, Montefilia.
Osipenko.
Terrific return.
Hinged. She's out of the grave.
Terrific return. Yeah, she's been resuscitated. she's like Jesus Christ of Nazareth.
Like every time I hear that horse in that opener, I'm like, oh, it was such a good call. I had to put him in. I blame you for tipping him.
Golden Mile.
Yeah.
He barely held on. That was a pretty trash edition of the Caulfield Guineas.
Yes, mate. He doesn't run out a mile.
No, he doesn't. Not at all. And you compare it to another Godolphin colt who won it the year prior, Animo.
Yeah. He could run a race, couldn't he?
He could certainly run a race, the big fella.
I have a question to ask you off the top. Would you ever go bungee jumping?
Well, we often ask the drifters to be curious. And, you've got to be curious about these things in life. Short answer, 100%. I'd go bungee jumping. I'd go skydiving. I haven't done it, but I would.
Yeah, okay. All right. I've asked a lot of people this question over the last week or so, not even in the last few days.
Okay.
And they're like, fuck no. They're like, oh, I'd go skydiving, but I wouldn't go bungee jumping. Reason is because when I was seeing these old people from work, I don't know if you've met Angus, but he's a good time. He's a good fella. And he's like, oh man, Queenstown's fucking sick. He's like, you got to go bungee jumping. It's he's like, it's the best I've ever felt ever. And he likes a good time.
Whoa.
So, and I was like,
so he's an adrenaline junkie.
Well, he was like,
I call him Adrenaline Angus.
Double A. But he was saying basically it's the purest form of adrenaline that you can feel because it's the literal fight or flight. And you're like, I'm about to die right now. And then you come out the other side.
Yeah. Well, are you a roller coaster guy?
No. That's where I'm like, it would be a pretty big thing for me because I'm not a huge fan of heights and I'm not a roller coaster guy.
Okay.
So if I'm to take the literal plunge, I'm really curious to see how I'd feel.
It's one of those things where I think you just have to do it, and you have to put yourself in a situation where you're going to hate every second, and then once you jump and you're like, cool, I survived, you'll think about it for the rest of your life, and you'll be like, I'm glad I did that. Yeah.
I'm a real 50-50 because drifters. I'm heading to New Zealand this week, and if I'm gonna bungee jump anywhere, it's gonna be there, right?
100%, yeah.
I'm not gonna do it in like, with all due respect, like South America or.
With all due respect, no mate. It's just common sense. Sometimes common sense isn't necessarily respectful. Drifters, that's something that you need to learn. Look, this is my thoughts on it, mate. Not that they particularly matter because I'm not going to be in Queenstown with you, but I think YOLO. But also, if I was up top on the ledge wherever they do the bungee jumping and it was, T minus 10 seconds till I had to actually release and jump off the platform, yeah, mate, my pants would be soiled. They'd be brown. Pants stay brown. But I'd be shitting myself. But I'd still do it. Just like if you're in the plane prior to the skydiving, I'd be scared shitless.
Yeah. The difference between that, though, is that you usually strap to someone's chest in a skydive and they jump for you. You have to jump in a bungee jump.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think-
you have to take the leap of faith.
And thank God we have Jesus Christ on our side.
Yeah, thank God that this podcast not only is sponsored by the good people at Ned's, but it's sponsored by Jesus Christ of Nazareth. The name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Mate, well, we went to a Catholic school.
We did. Yes.
We managed to make a few Eucharists, a few breaking of breads.
Christ. Literally
Christ.
Christ.
Almighty.
How many times? Countless.
So many times.
And look at us now. Absolute
Degenerates
who gamble responsibly. Now, how I wanted to kick things off, because let's be honest, Drifters, the cards are underwhelming after the high of last week with the Winx Stakes. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion about something that's popped up in the racing media over the last, I'd say, a couple of months. It's not something that ever really goes away, because one issue that horse racing, that as an industry really face, is how to engage that next generation. So I texted you last night about this. It's like, let's have a chat about this, because I'm actually really, really interested to see what your opinion is. How can we, as like two people who are really invested in the game, in the sport, how can we engage the next generation of people, a little bit younger than us or around our age?
Yeah, welcome to my TEDx talk. It's such a difficult question to answer in a podcast that, let's be honest, we don't have 6 hours. And it's a question that, the industry execs, so on and so forth, struggle to answer. I don't know. I sort of look at it in several different ways. So firstly, you can look at racing and you can compare it to the other codes and the other sports that are prevalent in Australia, right? So, used recently by Racing Victoria, looking at cricket and looking at the Big Bash and how that's revolutionised the sport in Australia in the last decade or so. And then you look at like Rugby League and AFL, which, to be honest, is just going from strength to strength. Like you've got a better understanding of the AFL landscape than I do. But both games seem to be going from strength to strength, with viewership, people actually, getting on their bike, going to the games. I'm not sure what they're like at grassroots, but I'm pretty sure participation's going up. The code that's struggling the most in Australia is rugby union, because, like, let's be honest, they've got absolutely no idea what's going on and their heads are in the sand.
Majority of people didn't even know that the Wallabies were leaving for the World Cup last week.
No.
That's the issue.
I didn't even know the Bledisloe was on, mate.
Did you know the next World Cup's in Australia?
No, had no idea.
There you go.
Yeah. There you go. So if you look at those other codes and what are they doing to be successful right now, they are engaging young people. So the Big Bash is a product that's, entirely catered towards younger people, because it's faster paced. They do a lot of things at the actual game that'll, they've got the dance cams and all that sort of stuff.
Family
Entertainment.
event.
Exactly. It's a family event. AFL and Rugby League, I know, are pumping a lot of money into grassroots. I found out recently that for a season of AFL, for Auskick or for a junior or whatever, it's like $80 as opposed to Rugby League, which I think is maybe $150 to $200, and then the other codes are way more expensive. So there's an incentive there.
Don't get me started with cricket.
Cricket, mate.
My God.
Astronomical.
When I was back in my day,
Yeah.
this was, nearly a decade ago, that's like $650 just to play.
100%.
Without any of the gear, without, petrol, traveling, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I think when RV was talking about, utilising some of the things that Big Bash has done really well that might be innovative, and then applying that to like a racing series in Victoria, I think they were looking at it the wrong way. They were looking at, what can we do that's like interesting and dynamic and make the product more enticing to watch? It's like, well, no, if you're looking to get younger people involved, like if you've got someone who's probably 25 or older, your interest is starting to get pretty set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
And the two of us, by the time we were 25, already loved racing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We love it more now because of this and because of just naturally with time. But if you said to me, hey, Declan, you really need to get into baseball in the next 6 months, I'd be like, I don't have any room for that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
awesome going and watching a game. Where they need to start doing it is younger, and people get into sport when they're younger because it's a family thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we just spoke about the Big Bash, the Rugby League, and the AFL doing things that make it more of a family occasion. So that's getting kids to play the game because the family's like, hey, this is the cheapest and let's do that. And it's more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, making it like more of a family event when you actually go to the game.
Mm.
So one of my colleagues at work, he took his 2 young boys to a family day at Doomben or Eagle Farm over the winter. And basically they set up an entire day that was catered towards family. So they did all the stuff that kids are into. I don't really fucking know what that is. But
Yeah.
And I think racing needs to do more of that because you've got to think long term. And I don't think there's a short, sharp fix to getting the youth involved in racing more. Like, it's not going to just happen in 5 years. Like, but if you take a longer term view, 10, 15, 20 years, that's what I think there needs to do. So I think there needs to be more things that are enticing families to take their kids out to the races on a Saturday.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Take them up to the sunny coast on a Sunday, you know, have a picnic on the grass, watch some ponies go around, like encourage them to visit the stables, see the horses, and it's completely removed from the gambling side of it. It's about the actual family event. And that's going to have a delayed gratification, but, mate, things you work for, they're all the more satisfying. So that's one avenue I was looking at. There's a few others, but I thought that was one that sort of sprung to mind first if I'm looking at comparing it to other codes. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a really good point because the way I'm thinking about it is it kind of leans into that just with a different aspect, right? If you were to say to me, picture a really big horse racing crowd, the default that people would often think of is Melbourne Cup and the Everest now, right?
Yeah.
I don't think of that. I think of the farewells for Winx, for Black Caviar, for Mackay Diva, because the crowd is there to see one horse and one horse only.
100%. And not even necessarily a swan song race. Think about Giga Kick for the Doom of 10,000.
Mate, we saw that firsthand, and I think that's what racing needs to do. They need to celebrate their best athletes, their best horses, because they are the biggest stars of the show. So there's footage of Farlap back in the day.
Yeah.
And during a depression where he would just basically bring all of the punters to the track because
It was him
they wanted to see Big Red.
and Don Bradman.
Yes.
They were the 2 stars
Yeah, absolutely.
during
So
the Depression.
I think it's all about the content and marketing of these superstars that honestly don't see much of the public eye.
You're right. If you spoke to 100 30-year-old Australians and asked them if they knew who Farlap was, surely your percentage is over 90.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, like I don't know when he ran, but I know he's a famous Australian racehorse, like from the 30s or something like that. I'm assuming an overwhelming response would say they know who Farlap is. And then probably you go below that, you probably look at Winx, I reckon. And then below that, you're probably looking at Black Caviar, Mackay Diva, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I completely agree. The stars that we have right now, Giga Kick, I Wish I Win, are the 2 that come to mind.
Well, that's the thing, right? If I was a big dog at Racing New South Wales or, Racing Australia, I'd be finding their money because they've got plenty apparently because they're increasing the prize money. Why don't you invest it in your own sport, invest it in content, and then you basically get a camera crew, you put together a narrative because there's always going to be a narrative. You can basically market things however you want it.
Look at Drive to Survive. Look at The Last Dance, all that sort of stuff.
That's the thing, right? So if I was in their shoes, this is how I'd do it this season. Like it or love it or hate it, the Everest is now, it's getting pretty close to being the main dish.
I reckon it is very close, mate, and it's probably the most relevant in terms of being able to capture that younger audience.
Exactly right. So why wouldn't you get a camera crew with Chris Waller and the connections of Nature Strip, because he is, for the first time in his career, an underdog, going up against the hot young things of I Wish I Win and Giga Kick. It's like, can the champion do it again?
Yeah.
I would love that narrative.
Like Rocky 6.
Because there's only 4 or 5 horses that have got an Everest slot. He's a 50-50 to get one. I think he probably does deserve one.
I think so, yeah.
But it's not locked in. So that element is fascinating. You know, his trials, he lost in a trial. He doesn't usually lose in trials. Seeing that would be fascinating. Getting Chris Waller's insight, J-Mac's insight.
Owners.
I think that element, and when Nature Strip has moved on, if the other one that you could target towards is something like the Golden Eagle, with all those different form lines coming together, and then you have this super West Australian filly going up against the big dog of Giga Kick, where Giga Kick could be racing to be in like the top 3 prize money earners of all time at
the age of 4.
going into that race.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's so many different ways and different storylines that you could tell through a series like that, like A Drive to Survive. Because F1, by all reports, was
struggling.
It was struggling. Now look at it, mate.
Yeah, going off.
It wasn't a sport in the US. Now it is pumping.
Yep.
Unbelievable. So I think it's absolutely essential for the growth in that next generation to, really just get them involved by the brilliant content that you can see. Because how many times, right, if Channel 7 are to get the rights to the Melbourne Cup again, right, I can almost guarantee you the way that they'll showcase the race. They'll have the standard vision that you'd see on Sky or Channel 7 or whatever, but then they'd have that low shot of the horses running past, which they did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The product needs to evolve.
100%. I agree. I think the stories behind the superstars of our sport is the most important thing, and the superstars of our sport aren't necessarily the jockeys, mate. To your point, it's the horses. So another one for me is there's so many things going on behind the scenes in the great game of racing that you read about in like a 300-word article after the fact. And I think a recent one comes to mind is Very Elegant in the Melbourne Cup. Like, all the chatter was that she wasn't actually, like, the Cox Plate's a grand final. That's her last race for the prep, and then she turns up in a Melbourne Cup 10 days later or whatever it is, and probably has the most dominant performance we've seen in a Melbourne Cup for an incredibly long time. Was that always the plan? And if so, absolute genius by Chris Waller and co. How awesome would it be to see at 2 months beforehand, before she even starts her prep? Okay, so we actually, depending on all things going well, we want to get her to a Melbourne Cup, and that's the goal. But we're just going to keep it under wraps. And so you watch this documentary after the fact, and it's the story of Very Elegant, the champion mare, getting to a Melbourne Cup against the freakish horse Incentivize and winning. So yeah, 100%. There's so many storylines. I could think of Animo. Imagine watching Animo's story get to the Cox Plate.
100%. And it's not just to those big dog trainers either. I think anything like this, there's 2 sides to, for every Red Bull, there's a Williams team.
Yeah.
It's like they had a whole episode on that shit show of a franchise. You know what I mean? And they're constantly in the headlines because, like it or hate it, F1 drivers, there's only 20 of them on the planet.
Yeah.
Like, they're the most elite athletes on earth.
Yeah.
So it's like, even if you're driving for the shittest side and you're coming 17th each week, you're still at that tippity top.
Yeah, you are.
And not many people can be jockeys. Not many people can be horse trainers either. And the best horses in the country need to be celebrated more.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what gets people to the tracks, and that's what, they're all talking about wagering. That's what's going to drive wagering, mate, if you get people to the track and people understand the story, because everyone has a bet on the Melbourne Cup, and everyone's probably starting to have a bet on the Everest now because it's the story. It's like it's like, oh yeah, I'll have a little $5 on
yes.
that. Yeah.
100%. So that's our thoughts.
Yeah. And it's funny the way you were talking about it, because Bruce Clark, who's a known racing entity and writes for RaceNet and does a bunch of other stuff in the industry. His story this week was all about, gimmicks aren't going to get people to the races and increase wagering. The stories behind racing are all the superstars of our game. And he touched on the fact that, Jamie Carr was back. He touched on the fact that Chris Waller brought his 150th Group 1 win up with an Ingham family-owned horse in the famous Pink Silk. So, yeah, I 100% agree with you, mate. And, will that translate through to what the actual suits are doing who run Racing Victoria and Racing New South Wales and Queensland and so on and so forth? Will it actually translate? Who knows? Maybe. Got to be positive about these things.
There's one for golf. There's one for tennis. I tune into all of them. There's been the Last Dance, obviously, centered around Jordan. The test. There's been one, obviously, for the F1. Horse racing needs its time in the sun. There's been one for AFL, Tales of Tiger Town.
Yeah.
With Madge. I need to see it.
Sunderland Till I Die in the soccer or football. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. But I think, I've got faith. I think racing is the best sport in the world, and it's because we know it intimately. So you just need to open up that opportunity to get people sort of invested. And to your point, I think it's coming at it differently, telling the story. But then also to my point, it's getting people interested earlier.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
okay.
Well summarised, mate.
All right. So that's how you get the next generation drifters. If you have any suggestions, leave some comments in, because we'll do up a couple of social posts about that. Now, this weekend of racing it's not grim. It's just not great.
It's not up to our standard.
No, we deserve more because that's the type of young men that we are. Race 7 at Rosehill is the up-and-coming stakes for the 3-year-olds, 1,300 metres. I thought this was a tricky little contest, but I have found one that I am keen on. What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, it certainly is a difficult contest. I am not too interested in having a play. So, as we've learned on this podcast, drifters, if you're not too keen to have a play, try and find some juice so you can have a little throw at the stumps. I'm going to steer clear of the two favourites, which is number 3, Cabalas, and number 11, Les Vampires, or Les Vampires. Vampires. And I'm going to go to an enormous cult up top, number 2, Cafe Millennium.
Love it.
And the reason being is because on his debut, we were like, is this thing winning the size over 1,400 metres as a Group 1 horse? Because he absolutely put that field to the sword.
Turns out he didn't.
And he didn't do that. He runs 5th in a Todman out of 5 horses, losing to Cylinder, interestingly enough. And then on a heavy deck in the size, he runs 10th out of 13. So not a big trial guy, but he's been trialling well. And he was enormous as a 2-year-old. And maybe he had to just mentally catch up with his physical prowess. Speak of the devil and she will get injured. So Cafe Millennium at $18 with Neds. I reckon if there's a bit of specking in the market for him, obviously Johnny O'Shea's got him going, and maybe he's more of a mile-type Guineas horse. Plus, he's just funny because he's so fucking huge.
He is, isn't he?
He's enormous.
I think he's a spring champion horse myself. I think I want to see him over far further. Tell you what, he was okay in 2 Randwick trials, but I don't know how he's going to get around Rosehill either.
He's so big.
I don't know. I don't think that's his track. But what I am interested to see him on is a good track again. He might just need it a bit hard, because that debut win was sensational.
Well, mate, he can't get his hooves out of the ground because when it's wet, because there's so much weight behind him. He's just glue.
It's like cement.
Exactly. Poor man.
But I'm going with one of the favourites here, Waller, J-Mac, Cabalas. Really liked its prep so far. I think
He was flopped out of the gates last start.
He was cultish, which is all his right to be. $1.90 starting price profile. got out very, very late, hit the line, and just had back me next start all over it. Getting a better price now because he missed by half a length. And the start prior, he beat home Estrella, who was a runner-up last week as well. So I'm happy to back him. Barrier 4, I reckon J-Mac's just going to get him in the absolute prime position. And I'm hoping that Le Vampire and Manwee, Kevin Tari's son,
Manwee. Oh.
set a bit of a pace up front.
Gee whiz. If he wins this, that would be all time.
Sire, Kevin Tari.
So if he wins this, like, this is a Group 3. You're setting him for like a Guineas.
Yeah.
And you've got Kevin Tari's only son in a Group 1 race.
Didn't he win the round with Guineas?
Kevin Tari, yeah.
Wow.
He won the Randwick Guineas, not the Caulfield Guineas, which is obviously...
No, that's all right. He's
But
a prep away.
It's still Guineas.
Mate, he's had one run.
Manwee. Yeah, look, hope he goes well.
So, Cafe Millennium for you, Cabalus for me.
Yes. So let's have a little wager.
Okay.
If Manwee beats both our horses home, we have to back him if he's in a Group 1. This prep, we have to. We
Yeah.
have to.
Yes. Okay.
He has to be
All right.
at least part of our Group 1 betting strategy.
Yeah, he'll be in a Quinella.
Deal.
There's one, actually, that I do think will be heading towards a spring champion path as well. I'll be interested to see when we preview the next race, I might have a look, but Ducas, number 6 for the Freedmans. I think this horse had a bit of a prep in Brisbane as well. Was finishing off quite strongly behind the likes of Sofrado and those type of horses. I think he will only get better going out to further, but barrier 1 for him is no good.
Stinky.
Race 8 is the San Domenico Stakes, 1,100 metres for the 3-year-olds as well. Now, speed maps here, I had the instructor going forward with introducing, and then the very fast Fire Star as well for the Snowdens, who only fell in last start at the 1,200. So 1,200, the 1,100 here probably does suit. Any firm opinions here? You have the likes of Armed Forces coming back from a Brisbane prep, so they'll have that residual fitness. The instructor was decent last start, as was introducing. Libertad is a progressive colt for Annabelle Neesham and the Godolphin too as well.
Yes. It's interesting you got Corniche in this race. He was the last horse to beat Shinzo. The Godolphin thing. But I just don't have a particularly strong opinion in this race. Again, you're probably looking for some value, but the two horses that I am relatively keen on are number 9, Kadinsky Abstract, which is the $3 million Coolmore-owned colt, who looks to have some ability. He's $6 with the good people at Ned's. Then Cigar Flick, who I backed last start, who got held up and finished 4th. She probably should have finished 2nd or 3rd. I don't think she was beating Tis Invincible, but she's $11 with the good people at Ned's. So they're the two that I'm sort of umming and ahhing between. So, yeah, again, not a particularly strong opinion of this race.
Yeah, Kadinsky Abstract for me. This horse has been ultra impressive from the very limited runs that we've been able to see from him. So, he's 1 from 1. Not a bad win on debut at Canterbury. And then his latest trial was really nice. And I think J-Mac is pretty excited to be on the back of this thing. So I'm on his side. Barrier 11 is sticky. I think there's no other option to try and find a position midfield, maybe 3 wide with a bit of cover. But Rosehill on a good track, you want to be probably midfield at worst. It's going to be difficult for him. The other one who was a really impressive last start winner was Untouchable Legend down the bottom. $21 at Canterbury Park on a soft deck, but looped him. Came from last and put him away really nicely. So if you're looking for a bit of juice into your same race multis with the good people at Ned's, he's could be the one. Now, that's all for the stakes races, but I thought we'd have a look at the benchmark hundreds as well. So race 9 at Randwick, Rosehill. I thought this was another stinky race, but I found it really difficult to find any value. So I am going for the favourite Colino, which I can't really believe. I've never really been a fan of his with Brett Pebble back on board. But when you're losing only by 3 lengths by Buenos Noches, and I think you're right in the game in the first place, but at the same time, back on top of the ground, back out to the 1,400 metres here, which will suit him. And I've had a look through this horse's profile. I think he's much better when he's got shorter distances between his runs, so shorter breaks. He was 4 weeks in between runs there. He might have just been knocked up. I think the week back up, I don't think he's done it before, but I'm keen to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think Colino is going to be hard to beat. I'm leaning towards Glint of Silver, though, in that race, who's the second line of betting. Thought it was a really good return in the spring preview handicap in which my guy, Pericles, won. Madame Pomeroy and Pericles were clearly the 2 horses out of that race, but I thought Glint of Silver showed some ability. So, that's the horse for me in that race. But as you can probably tell, Drifter's not overly confident, not overly keen.
Let's go to Moonee Valley, which has been just extremely tough to punt at, to say the least.
Terrible.
So the Carline Stakes is race 8 on the program, 1,000 metres for listed. Now, I think this is quite a speedy race over the 1,000 metres, as you'd expect, with the likes of Snapper, Omni-Man, Acromantula, Hypothetical, and Midwest drawing out wide too. So, did you have a pony that you settled on here?
I backed Sweet Ride last start, and it beat Omni-Man home, but Omni-Man didn't have a lot of luck in running. And they sort of meet each other here, slightly worse at the weight, Sweet Ride, I think. So
1.5 kilo swing.
Yeah, so I'm not a massive, weight guy when it's over 1,000 metres. But if you're looking at the race, it looks to be a stack of pace on. I think both Omni-Man and Sweet Ride will sit just off them. So it's one of those two for me. I'm probably leaning more towards Omni-Man, I think, to turn the tables on Sweet Ride. But again, speaking of sweetened, oh, gee whiz, I backed her a stack early on in her career. She changed stables to Will Clark and Nikki O'Shea earlier this year. Starts running really well, sweetened. Before that, couldn't buy a win. So, yeah, I'd be disappointed if she gets up here. $12 with the good people at Ned's, but that's my thoughts.
I was on the same wavelength with Omni-Man, but I've had a look at how many runs has he had this prep.
He's been out for a while.
He's had a lot, and he missed the last start, which he doesn't usually do. So, mate, that sometimes can be a bit
alarm bells,
bit of an indicator that, I'll put in, but I'm at the end of my prep. Give me a spell.
Yeah, give me a spell, bro.
But back on a good track, because he doesn't really go on a heavy, and even though it says a soft 5 there, it was raining throughout the program at Moonee Valley. I think it could have been a soft 6 or a soft 7 the next race. So it couldn't have been. It could have been very unsuited for him. I'm happy to risk him. If he wins, so be it. Midwest for me. Resuming 3 from 3 at the track and distance. Last 12 months has had 6 runs, hasn't run outside the top 3, has trialled up an absolute bomb. So if, there's different lanes on the day, as it can be at Moonee Valley sometimes.
Tell you what, sure can be.
If it's out wide, which I doubt it because it's supposed to be a good track, so if it's going to be anywhere, it's going to be the fence, which he's not going to find. But if it is by some miracle, bucket small, out wide, bang, 950. Yes, please. And we have the Benchmark 100, race 9 on the program. So did you find one here? Deny Knowledge, scratch from last week, rocks up here.
Yeah, I think St. Lawrence is going to be too hard.
I agree.
To beat. Yeah, just and with the extra weight off with Carleen Heffel's apprenticeship claim, hasn't been doing much wrong at all. So it's the one for me. $2.40 with the good people in Ned's, short enough, but I reckon it'll get crunched in.
Agreed. That is all she wrote, I reckon. Drifters, no review podcast this week because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm in the motherland of New Zealand.
I'm actually on a fishing trip.
Now, When's the last time you cast a rod?
Oh, I reckon a good 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer. But we're talking like, mate, might have even been St. George River and a tinny. Like, this is different. This is different gravy. Mate, we're on the charter for 10 hours.
10 hours?
10 hours.
Shit.
So
have you been on the ocean, like open ocean like that before? You might get seasick.
Yeah, I might get seasick.
Wow.
Yeah. So
You seem like that type of guy, actually.
well, I'm pretty sick. Yeah. So I'm a little bit nervous about that, to be honest. I'm going to get some Procalm, like, to help with nausea, to have beforehand and just pray. So look, there's no use getting, potentially worried and upset about something that hasn't happened yet, nor might happen at all.
Yes.
So I'm just going to play it by ear. Apparently you can catch, like where we're going, you can catch fucking tuna,
Sick.
which is sick.
Tuna, if they stop moving, they die.
Really?
Yeah. So they're just constantly like swimming. And then as soon as you get in the boat, they're bang, done.
Really?
Yep.
GG.
Yep.
Wowee.
That
But
could be a specific type of tuna. It might be yellowfin or something. But yeah,
you're asking the wrong guy.
pretty hectic.
That is hectic though. But no, the dudes, a couple of dudes at work are really keen fishermen, and they said, yeah, if you catch the right tuna, you can sashimi it and just bang that
Yeah,
night.
sick.
And I'm like, that is right up my alley. Get me some soy sauce and I will go to town.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if you're seasick, that's probably the last thing you want to eat.
Oh. Yeah, we'll see how I go, Drifters.
Yeah.
I'll have an update for you next week.
Get me a chicken katsu don instead.
Yep, we can't find chicken in the ocean.
All right. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Bye, Drifters.
Goodbye.